integration channels, and we will start with ECP, where the main document regarding description of integration channels is ECP public interface guide, and the channels which can be used on ECP level are AMQP, web service, file system channel, and of course user interface. But it's not much automated. So if we look into public interface guide, we have here firstly some logical description of messaging API, and then the separated chapters for all integration channels. Maybe we'll check. Yeah, each operation, like send message, receive message, has some input parameters. Some of them are necessary and some of them not. For example, for sending messages, it's necessary to fill in a receiver code and business type. BA message ID sender application are not necessary to be provided. That's then more for the project if it is defining how to fill this fields, and also content is necessary to be provided. In the response of the sent message is unique message ID, which is generated by ECP when message is sent, and by this message ID you can then obtain message status by all the channels. So we will move to configuration of such channels, and I have prepared file system channel and AMQP channel. Firstly, we can see in ECP endpoint configuration this part, which is related to integration with EDX toolbox. The channel between these two applications is AMQP, so it has to be enabled. And also we are defining this send handler, which is useful and necessary for provision of message status from ECP endpoint to EDX toolbox. So when you are sending a message from your EDX toolbox, it's sent to ECP endpoint, and on ECP level, the statuses are changed. You probably know that there are statuses like accepted, delivered, and received. This status is changed by internal acknowledgement messages, which are sent by the receiver of the business message. And in case that such status change message is received on ECP endpoint changes the status of the message to delivered and received. And thanks to this AMQP API send handler, this status change is also provided to EDX toolbox. So EDX toolbox also can set the correct message status. So that's why this configuration is needed in ECP endpoint. Otherwise, the messages from toolbox are sent properly to the receiver, but your EDX toolbox does not update the statuses, so you can see all messages just in accepted state. Okay, the second part is definition of AMQP API. We can separate each message type, which can be defined by the specific message type or also by some asterisk type. And each of such message type can be then received to another incoming queue in ECP endpoint. So here we can see that ECP AMQP1 or messages with message type ECP AMQP1 will be received into queue ECP endpoint in ECP AMQP1. And messages started or starting EDX dash will be provided to ECP endpoint inbox, which is the default queue for incoming messages to AMQP channel, and EDX toolbox is consuming from this queue. Therefore, if we want to send a message on this environment to EDX toolbox, we need to start its message type with EDX dash. And the last part is the configuration of file system channel. Here, again, we need to enable such interface, and we have to configure directories where we put files which will be sent out from ECP endpoint, and here we set up it to folder FSSF out, and also we need to define error folder and log folder for outgoing messages. And for incoming messages, we can, as well as in AMQP channel, separate each message type to another folder. Of course, we can, with colons, we can extend it for more message types. So more message types can be also stored in one directory in this case. The similar it is also in AMQP. So we have such setup, and now if we will send a message with the specific message type, we will see that the messages are let's say filtered to the proper channel and also to the proper folder or queue. So I will log into GTAG endpoint. And I will send message to Lion, and I will use this ECP AMQP1 message type. So the message should be then received in ECP AMQP1 AMQP queue. So I have sent it, it's received, so the receiving endpoint received the message to the proper queue, and here in some testing UI, we will receive the message from the queue. As there is by default configured AMQPS channel, which is AMQP with SSL enabled, we need to provide to the connection string certificate, password of the key store, and key alias in the key store. And also the channel is secured by username and password, so both has to be provided. And we are connecting to AMQPS on such port. Probably we will explain more why there is port 12,002 in Docker part. Nevertheless, this 12,002 port is forwarded to 5672, which is standard internal broker port on ECP endpoint. And we want to read the message from ECP endpoint in ECP AMQP1 queue. So when I receive it, I can see that we have received this message with message ID 94BB. And if I will see detail of this sent message, we can see that this message was received in this or from this queue. So then we can send to Lion another message to Lion's file system channel. Field, and if I send test message, it's received, and I will also send a message to the second folder. Here, for example, is BA message ID. Send it. So both messages were sent and received on Lion, and if I go to Lion data file system channel, and here is in ECP FSSF1, and we can see that the first message was received. We set up sender application as webinar 1. So according to naming convention of the files received on or by file system channel, we can see firstly the sender application, then the sender code, and message type. And then there is some unique identifier. And in folder 2, we should see the second message, which was specified by BA message ID 1. So it's also in the same naming convention. When we do not fill one of the not mandatory fields, there is just empty string instead of some null value. Okay, and I forgot to mention in the configuration the web service channel, which is actually the default one. So in case we will send a message to or message with message type, which is not mentioned in any configuration of other integration channels, then the message is automatically routed to web services. Information center applications. application, and if I select file, so I send it, the message remains in the delivered state because it was not consumed by any application. And so we can see it as well on the receiver ECP endpoint in user interface in the similar way as the other files which we sent. And here I can see that the message is still in delivered state, and I can download it from user interface. I can do it, for example, with these internal configurations, which were sent by service catalog. But the ECPWS message I will keep in delivered state, so I can now receive it by web service. In the web service, there is also a configuration of some basic authentication, such as username and password. So also this channel is secured. And we can see that I just fill in that I want all business types to be downloaded and also download the content. And if I call the web service, I received information that there is a message to be received with this message ID, receiver code, sender code, and business type, as well as the not mandatory parameters. And here in the attachment, I have this message. So that's my sent message. And in web service channel, I need to confirm that I have received this message. So I need to call another web service, which says to endpoint that the target business application downloaded the message. Otherwise, the message still remains in the delivered state. But when I when I use confirm receive message method, and I put here the message I have downloaded, or message ID, message I have downloaded, it will reply me with the same message ID. Nevertheless, it changed its status to received. So you can see that the state was changed. And also, if I call it once again, it reports invalid message state error with information that the message is already in final state. So that was to ECP integration channels. Do you have any question regarding ECP integration channels?